Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we are going to discuss India's strategic interests in Iran and how far can India pursue its interests in the face of US attempts to isolate Iran, in the face of UN sanctions and sanctions by the European Union. During his recent visit to Tehran, Indian Foreign Minister Salman Khurshid promised $100 million for the development in fact of the Chahbahar Port, and Iran in turn has said that Indian companies are welcome to explore oil in Iran on a production sharing basis. This is an attempt to deepen the relationship, but how easy and how smooth is it going to be to develop this relationship in the face of various hurdles it faces? To discuss some of these issues and answer these questions, I have with me a very distinguished panel. I have with me Ambassador Vivek Katju. He was our ambassador to Afghanistan and handled Iran for, I think, a record number of 6 years in the Foreign Office. Ambassador Leela Ponappa, our Deputy National Security Advisor and expert on the region. And my old friend Qamar Agha, he is an independent journalist, a visiting professor at Center for West Asian Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia. I think you've just left them, you just finished that assignment, but also an expert on Iran. So welcome all of you to this discussion. Vivek, let me begin with you. What are India's primary interests in Iran and how far have we been successful in pursuing those interests?
Well, Iran is a very important country of the region. We have old civilizational contacts, but apart from that, in the present day context, we have very significant economic interests in Iran and also political interests, because there was a phase when Iran and India played, along with Russia, played a very significant role in Afghanistan and kept the Taliban at bay for a considerable period of time. The US sanctions and UN sanctions, European sanctions, pose a major problem to the relationship because one has to be realistic, and at the same time we've got to manage our relationship with Iran in the context of our relationships with the Arab countries across the Gulf. So all in all, it is an exercise in diplomatic navigation. But I think till now we've been by far and large successful.
Leela, how has India's growing closeness to the United States affected our relationship? Vivek hinted at it, but how has it affected? How much of a hurdle has it been?
No, it has certainly created impediments which India has had to deal with. The sanctions are certainly a large part of it, because as Vivek very clearly distinguished, there are the UN sanctions, and then there are the unilateral sanctions that the US and the EU have brought to bear. Now, given the nature of our trading relationships and our economic relationships with both these entities, with the US and the EU, sometimes you do get clash in terms of how much India can do and is in a position to do. Now, I think the other problem really, I think the whole thing starts with a perception, and I would say really a mental block that the United States has. I don't think they have ever got over the hostage crisis. And to this day, even though Iran proved that it could even almost partner the US in terms of dealing with the post 9/11 situation, the US has not been able to bring itself to deal in a calibrated manner with Iran. Now, sometimes this impinges on our dialogue really with the United States, but I think India has equally been making very persistent efforts to try to help to get the United States to understand why not only does the India-Iran relationship matter in terms of India's interests, but that it is in America's own interests to try to move beyond a certain stage in terms of dealing with Iran.
So, Qamar, given what Vivek and Leela are saying, do you think Salman Khurshid's visit and what he proposed during this visit is a sort of a strategic defiance of America, or do you think Washington need not lose any sleep over it?
I think Americans understand this very well, you know, and at one point of time even American wanted, you know, that India to make some negotiate, you know, make a deal, you know, something on Afghanistan, especially on Afghanistan, you know, they wanted. Second thing, bilaterally also it is very important for us. For us, this Chahbahar Port which you were mentioning and others are very important for us.
No, but would they be upset with our developing the Chahbahar Port?
I don't think they'll be upsetting, much, because there are some problems. Irritants are there, as Leela has mentioned, these are there. But they understand that India's difficulty, India's position on Iran, for us, Iran is very important. It's a gateway to Central Asia. Our entire dealing with Central Asia is through Iran. Then our dealing with Afghanistan is through Iran. So we cannot leave that country. We don't want Iran, Pakistan or China access developing, or Turkey like we had during the Cold War period, CENTO type of situation emerging. So we want Iran, and for us it is very important. And to an extent, American also understands,
So, Leela, do you think it's purely accidental that Salman Khurshid went to Iran a month before the strategic dialogue with the US?
I think it's not as though these are necessarily linked. I think our equation with Iran stands on its own, and I entirely agree with both my fellow co-panelists that this is a very, very important relationship. Which is not to be hyphenated with the India-US equation. In fact, it's the other way around. I think America needs to learn from India that Iran has to be dealt with in its own right, because it is a very key country in terms of its geopolitical situation. As the Iranians have often expressed, they provide transit into Afghanistan, into Central Asia and into the Caucasus. It dominates the entire northern shore of the Gulf, the Persian Gulf actually. And it has a very vital eastern linkage this side of the Straits of Hormuz, and this is where Chahbahar comes into operation. Now, I think the Americans are frankly confused. There has been a discussion in America over the years, and I think this was particularly true, if I remember right, in the 90s, where there was a very strong move to try to restore and to repair US relations with Iran. But I think in terms of the current discourse with regard to Iran's nuclear program, the whole thing has become hostage to one issue. And when you point out to the Americans that the things that they accuse Iran of possibly doing have actually been done by one of Iran's neighbors, namely Pakistan, there is really nothing that they can say about it. So I do believe that the American approach is somewhat confused, and this comes because of what I believe is a mental block.
Okay, we need to take a break at this juncture. We'll continue with this discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing India's relationship with Iran and the difficulties related with pursuing Indian interests in Iran. Vivek, let's talk about the Chahbahar Port. Now, you've been associated with that project virtually from the inception. So, Chahbahar Port and the trilateral transportation agreement between Iran, India and Afghanistan, how significant are they? And would they help stabilize Afghanistan? If they help stabilize Afghanistan, then why should the US be upset with it? Because they too want stability in Afghanistan.
Look, for us, the Chahbahar Port is of great significance, because realistically speaking, the routes through Pakistan might not be available to us, to Afghanistan for quite some time. Therefore, I think the Zaranj-Dilaram road which was made was good for Afghanistan. They wanted it because they wanted an outlet.
This links Zaranj with Dilaram?
Dilaram, and then you go on to
Kandahar Highway.
Herat-Kandahar Highway, and then it goes on to Chahbahar, virtually along the borders of Iran and Pakistan. Now, therefore, the Afghans wanted it because it gave them another route to the sea. For us too, it was of great significance, and I think this was, and I think we should give credit where credit is due. Apart from the External Affairs Ministry, it was also the vision of Mr. Jaswant Singh when he was Finance Minister, when this whole project was conceived.
Yeah.
Now, there are two sets of problems there. One, there is the traditional route via Bandar Abbas to Islam Kila and then Herat. And there are vested interests there, which don't want the Chahbahar port to develop naturally. But there is an additional problem, which is that if you look at the Iran, then you find that the sheer population of Iran is more or less in the central part of the country. The bordering areas have non-Shias, and the road from Chahbahar up to the Afghan border passes through a non-Shia territory. And therefore, there are certain inhibitions, I think, in the Tehran establishment about developing this. Now, the last point, I think, is that even, I think it's very good that we've made a commitment of $100 million and the Iranians are showing interest. They've shown interest in the past. The Americans, since we were discussing the Americans, I think the Americans have the feeling that given the sanctions, it is not likely that the Chahbahar port, the infrastructure, the free zone, industrial development is going to take place anytime soon. But we must pursue it, because let us, the last point, very last point, because let us remember that Gwadar is developing quickly.
Yeah, I was just going to come to Gwadar, and I wanted to ask Leela this,
Sure.
that Chinese are controlling Gwadar now, although it's a commercial port, but it will be a major hub for their energy supplies. So doesn't Chahbahar development give us a strategic lookout point to see what the Chinese are doing in adjoining Pakistan in Gwadar, and how significant is having this kind of access?
No, certainly I think having commercial, even just plain commercial access to Chahbahar would be very vital in terms of the connectivity that India can have to points beyond. We talked about access to the sea for Afghanistan, because Afghanistan, like certain other countries, is a landlocked country. If you were to reverse that perception, India is currently a sea-locked country. We have no land access routes to the rest of our neighborhood through any of our neighbors. And you just have to study a map to figure that out. So that makes one important point. I think the aspect of the strategic presence in Chahbahar, keeping an eye on the Chinese, I think that could be overdone a little bit. Gwadar also still has a long way to go. I understand that while the port facilities themselves have in fact been developed, the hinterland does not have the infrastructure that is required in order to make this a viable port, and that there are people in Baluchistan, that the province of Baluchistan per se is not really very happy about the commercial aspects of the development of this port.
But that's because they are not direct beneficiaries of it.
Well, naturally, I think that's a very important part of it. How do you create stakeholders in such a major infrastructure
But we can rest assured it would happen. It will happen. If they develop the port, they will do that also.
It might. And so while certainly I think it would have some strategic interest, I don't believe that that is the driving force.
You know, one problem which, if you talk to the Baluch, they say the demographic shift, the cultural shift, because of this. They say large number of Punjabis and the people from other provinces would be coming, and Chinese would be coming. And they also say they are better workers, or they have money, the businessmen. So all of them are coming from outside there. So they are extremely, disturbed with this development, because they see they have a very limited role. Like just
but you don't see Gwadar being undone because of this. It may be ineffective initially, but eventually they will sort out these problems like any other nation.
It is coming up, And then Chahbahar for us, yes, it is very important because it's right across the...
No, but on Chahbahar, I want to ask you that if Chahbahar is also of interest to Iran, because it gives them access to the Indian market, then why have they delayed it so much? Vivek has pointed to one reason, that this whole thing started in the 1990s?
No, it is, as I said, both internal political reasons as well as economic reasons.
Yeah. But why was it, Vivek, why was it given to the Revolutionary Guard all this while? It was being managed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, not only the port but also the rail links. And now suddenly, December last year, I think the Supreme Leader said it should be given to the Indians. Now, does it reflect internal tensions in Iran, of Iranian politics, but also of Indian role in this region?
No, I don't think it's so much Indian role. In fact, the IRGC is in the vanguard of a Shiite assertion And it only establishes the point that I was making to you. Great fears that there may be a certain profile coming to the Sunni tribes, and also the Iranians are very wary of great development of greater linkages between Pakistani Baluch and their own Baluch. So that's a factor too. But I think now they are realizing, especially with the development of Gwadar, that they have to develop Chahbahar. And that is a very good thing, because perhaps inadvertently the Pakistanis, by giving it to the Chinese, have assisted.
Another thing, the Bandar Abbas port is choked.
Yeah.
And then the most of these, because of the traffic, and then the Central Asian republics, Tajikistan and others, they also want to use this Chahbahar.
Okay. At this point, we have to take a break again. We'll continue this interesting discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing India's interest in Iran and the difficulties in pushing forward these interests in the face of attempts to isolate Iran. Leela, I wanted to ask you a question about energy security. How important is Iran from the energy security point of view for India? And how is it that we are cutting down on our imports from Iran? It's been brought down by 25% between 2008 and 2012. Government of India claims that it's under UN sanctions. You can't spend more than a certain amount of money on oil imports from Iran. But others say it's under US pressure. What is the true picture?
Well, I cannot sort of speak on the basis of inside information, because one has left government years ago.
Okay, well, broadly, how much of it is because of US sanctions and how much of it is because of UN sanctions?
I would really say it's more because of UN sanctions. I think as much as India resists bilateral pressure from any country, whatever the pressures, I think equally India does try to function as a responsible member of the United Nations. We may not always agree with a particular path, but I think in this particular case, since it is something that is that has been put in place by the UN, we do respect it, while trying to see how we can work with Iran, because I think India has never hesitated to state that its partnership with Iran existed long before oil was a factor, and will continue to do so long after. This is true of the entire Gulf. So therefore, I think the energy aspect is vital. And I think to the extent that India is able to work around the sanction structure, I think to that extent it really would be of benefit to ourselves and certainly to Iran as well. But there are many other issues in the energy relationship.
No, I'm not quite sure whether the UN sanctions are directed against Iranian oil. It's US sanctions and European sanctions. In fact, the Europeans have embargoed the export of oil. And I would respectfully disagree with my senior colleague, because I really think that the real concern is twofold. One, financial transactions now to purchase Iranian oil are becoming extremely complex, because you can't do it in dollars. You've got to have some barter arrangements, and these are difficult.
And insurance.
And insurance. Second, I think the oil companies and private players in particular are getting very apprehensive of crossing the path or sort of crossing swords with US sanctions, because they are scared of falling foul.
You're saying Indian oil companies are scared of?
I think Indian, especially private players.
Companies that have dealings with the United States.
Exactly.
And I'm not suggesting that the US sanctions don't have their effect. Obviously they do. But I think the fact that India has so far tried to work around them, initially there were areas of success, then both the US and the EU really kept tightening the nose, as it were, around anything that Iran tried to do. And now I do believe that we have in place an attempt at some kind of rupee payment arrangement.
And an insurance structure is being put into place by Indian oil companies.
I think today Iran was the second largest supplier. Today, if I'm not mistaken, it's the 6th. You can check this out, but I think it's the 6th.
But the total imports have fallen from 16% in 2008 to 12%, and therefore a 25% fall. But what I wanted to ask you was, and I'll come to you in a minute, Qamar, is that is India playing the Iran card to put pressure on America for easing import of liquefied natural gas to India? Because they've been a bit chary of supplying LNG to India. So do you think this kind of strategy will work?
Look, as Leela rightly said, the Americans now have blinkers on as far as Iran is concerned because of the nuclear program. And I don't see an early resolution. In fact, I think that it's one of the most intractable problems in the world. It's extremely dangerous. As for us, it's very dangerous. And I think our maneuverability as time passes will get more limited.
Yeah. But Leela, how can the US not allow us to import LNG from the US itself, which they have huge amounts of, and at the same time not allow us to or put pressure on Iranian oil?
Well, the US thinks that it can do so, and to the extent that they can get away with it, they will certainly do it. I mean, the arguments that India has used in the past when these calibrated reductions of imports from Iran took place, I think the whole Indian argument was that, look, we are a hugely energy deficit country, and we need our supplies from wherever we can get them. Now, at the same time that our imports from Iran have gone down, our imports from other sources, notably Saudi Arabia, have gone up. As well as we've tried to diversify our sources. But we continue to import from Iran, so I don't think that there's been a sort of caving in as such. Yes, certainly there is an indication of pressure and sanctions, but America is not really out to take care of your interests. I think we should be clear on that. America will function in terms of what they wish to do.
So we will take care of our interests.
It's up to us to ensure that we retain autonomy in terms of how we try
what
to.
I wanted to ask
I
you
wanted to add one thing, you know. Almost more than 70% of our oil supplies come from this region.
In fact, that's what I'm asking you. That 3/4 of our oil supplies actually come from GCC countries, Gulf Cooperation Council countries. Okay, so how do we balance? How tough is it going to be for us to balance our relationship with Iran with the GCC? Because GCC countries not only supply us oil, they are also major importers of Indian manufactured goods, and there are millions of Indians working in these countries. So how do you balance these two relationships?
You know, we have, they understand this now. There was a pressure initially. There was a big pressure. Saudi wanted to, even willing to supply extra oil to us if we cut down from Iran, that was the proposal. But now they have come to realize that India will not do so, will continue to. We don't want to put all our, oil from one source, it's a policy is to diversify from different sources, the Arab, Persian and other countries, and we are also seeking equity in oil sector, Then second thing, we have a big trade with Arab world, almost more than $100 billion, 60 lakh Indians are working, who are sending almost 25 or $20 billion annually. And plus oil bills are there, So these are there, trying to balance it, and it is working quite well, because we don't want to be totally dependent on the Saudi Arabia, which is the major oil supplier,
Okay, but Vivek, how difficult is it? Are we managing these relationships well? Because Shia Iran and Sunni GCC are at loggerheads on a variety of issues. So how well are we managing the relationship?
I think we've done it very skillfully till now. So too. Frankly, we've done it with great skill till now. You're absolutely right. In fact, I'll use a strong word. I think the relationships between on the two sides of the Gulf are hostile. But we've succeeded, and I think both realize that we can't choose one over the other. But my worry is that while we have to conduct, as I said, an exercise in diplomatic and strategic navigation, the scope of play that we have will start getting a little reduced and will become a little narrow, and therefore it will be more of a testing time for our diplomacy than it has been hitherto.
Leela, last word to you. So how difficult is it going to be maintain strategic autonomy in this region? Shia Iran, Sunni Gulf countries
And
the
the
US breathing down your neck.
The US.
Well, I think the American oil story is also undergoing interesting
Yes, that's
changes
very interesting.
in terms of the reduction of US oil imports from this region. So one big question is, what is the nature of America's strategic engagement with this area going to be? I think in the immediate future, I don't see any major change. The US has demonstrated commitment to Israel and so on. But I think as far as India is concerned, I do believe that both Iran and the GCC countries recognize the importance of their ties with India independent of each other. And as long as India does not try to play one card against the other, we should be able to navigate these relationships through sensitivity and I would say constant engagement.
If we've run out of time, okay,
One
one sentence.
sentence. I think what Leela mentioned about the US becoming not only energy sufficient, but a net exporter of energy should be and its implications for our region, including us, should be a subject of another discussion here.
Yes, we'll do that. We'll do that. Thank you very much for coming here and sharing your views on India-Iran relations. And we'll have you again when we discuss what you've suggested. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye.